Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Hardwood Gameday with your host, Trevor Williams. We're going to give you some of the great matchups that are happening this week in the world of college basketball, men's and women's. We got a lot of great stuff to cover in this hour before we have tip-off at noon Eastern Standard Time, ladies and gentlemen. Can't get much better than this across the front, across everything that we have to do today to make sure we have the opportunity to hit the key important activities of college basketball. Without further ado, let's get into today's topics. We got some good games on the men's front going into Sunday and a lot of great women's events and games going on Sunday as well, ladies and gentlemen. You can't get, like I said, you just can't beat it right now. Fantastic way to start your Saturday morning. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a fantastic way to start your morning. Hopefully you got your nice breakfast and wonderful morning coffee to get you ready and excited for today's rendition of Hardwood Game Day. Just doing a quick social media stuff, and let's get the show on the road today, ladies and gentlemen. And the first thought, before I get that, make sure you follow Empty the Bench Network as well as my socials to get all the latest and updates of what we got going on our network and on our program today, ladies and gentlemen. All righty. To start us off, we're looking at the men's today. The one that everyone should probably have their afternoon circle leading into the perfect dinner time or lunchtime, wherever you are and across the United States, ladies and gentlemen, at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ladies and gentlemen, and 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN. We have BYU's number 13 in the nation versus Kansas, number 14 in the nation, ladies and gentlemen. Men's college basketball today, ladies and gentlemen, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, ladies and gentlemen. What a great match we got out here. We got Kansas, a blue blood in basketball, off to a rocky start this season, ladies and gentlemen. Record right now is 15-5 with a Big 12 conference record of 5-2. Not too bad, not too shabby. They can still win the Big 12. But then you also got to look at, ladies and gentlemen, BYU. A great, fantastic year in the Big 12 thus far. They are 17-3 with a conference record, ladies and gentlemen, as well as 5-2 across this matchup. Looking at what we got going on for this matchup, ladies and gentlemen, between BYU and Kansas. Kansas, I would say, overall across the board, defensive unit, looking at like the last 5 games, ladies and gentlemen, they don't have any common opponents where I can do apples to apples comparison. But if you look at their last 5 games for Kansas, they beat Kansas State 86-62, beat Colorado 75-69, beat Baylor 80-62, beat Iowa State 84-63, and they lost to West Virginia 86-75. Now, if you look at BYU, ladies and gentlemen, they lost to Arizona 86-83, lost by 3 in that margin. They beat Utah 91-78, lost to Texas Tech 84-71, lost to TCU. No, they beat TCU 76-70, and they beat Utah again 89-84 across that one, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you got for the last 5 games between these two schools. Relatively good across the board. Can't really complain of what they got stacked up in this mayhem in the Big 12. A great way to jockey up for position in the conference tournament play as we get closer, since February is right around the corner and teams are fighting for their position to belong in the great dance that we all love in our brackets. But, ladies and gentlemen, what we got here cooking, BYU points per game, ladies and gentlemen. We got 86.7 points per game compared to Kansas's 78.3 points per game. So give the edge to BYU as they like to score a lot of points. However, ladies and gentlemen, it's that defensive front that's going to make it quite interesting for the BYU squad today, ladies and gentlemen. Points given up about 71 points. given up compared to Kansas's 67. So this Kansas squad likes to play defense, likes to be a little bit physical, likes low-scoring games, as I mentioned for the last 5 games. From the field, I will be preaching to the choir today, ladies and gentlemen, preaching to that choir, as I like to do sometimes. From the field matters. If you get onto a nice run, we ended up seeing that happening. Because think about it, we saw that happen to Michigan and Michigan State last night. What a game that was, where Michigan State trailed by 18 points at one point. They clawed their way back to tie it, and then they lose as Michigan goes on a late run to close out that game. But that game I would say in the beginning of the second half, Michigan State found ways to make things happen, and they went on a 15-4 run. That's what I'm saying. The field matters in the scenario, and we could see that could play out today for Kansas and BYU. When you look at Kansas's field goal percentage, it's 47 this season, and compared to BYU's 49% chance, not say chance, but field goal percentage. Now, if you look at BYU's rebounds, they're about 40 compared to Kansas's 39.5, so we're just going to round that up to 40. Assists, 15 across the board for both squads. Block party, ladies and gentlemen. Get those blocks going. BYU is about 5 blocks per game compared to Kansas's 6 blocks per game. Steals, BYU is scrappy on that front, getting about 8 steals per game compared to Kansas's about 6.5, about 6 steals per game, averaging about 5.5. So BYU likes to steal the ball, which is going to be a key way to get fast points and get those quick turnover points. That's going to be capitalized. But if you play in a nice, 5-on-5 scenario, half-court basketball, be on the lookout for some Kansas blocks and creating that block party that they can produce out there. But for the assists, they got great ball movement. Like I said, 15 assists that's going on in that game. But the boards are looking fantastic across that front as well, ladies and gentlemen, where you have that 40 rebounds per game for both squads, looking very good, as I would like to say for myself. But you can break it down even further. The ESPN analysis breakdown right now for Kansas is about 36 points per game, not points per game, but chance to win in the scenario compared to BYU's almost 38 points percentage chance to win. So it's going to be a good one. So make sure you stay tuned in for that, ladies and gentlemen, in that slot of BYU, who's number 13 in the nation, versus Kansas, who's number 14 in the nation. Men's college basketball today, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on ESPN. This is probably the best ranked matchup that I could find for men's and women's today that I like. That it's going to be very good to watch. But you got to round up for Sunday. Since Super Bowl Sunday is next week, I guarantee you the college basketball slate for this Sunday is phenomenal, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just kind of kick it off and build up to that magnitude and the, I would say not rendition, but the energy that leads into tomorrow's games that I want to take a chance to highlight. To be the tip of the iceberg on the men's side, you got Alabama, number 23 in the nation, versus Florida, and who's number 19 in the nation. Men's college basketball tomorrow, February 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific time on ABC, ladies and gentlemen. Both of these SEC squads, middle of the road. Florida's looking relatively good across the board with 6 conference wins and 2 conference losses in the SEC. Alabama, on the other hand, very struggling across the board, 4-3 for the SEC right now. Conference overall record for these two squads, nothing too pretty. Florida's 15-6, Alabama's 14-6. So the reason why I picked this matchup, you look how close they are for the overall records. Yes, it's a tale of two different things based on the teams they end up playing and how they're shaking out in conference play. But let's look at the chance to win. The margin is so great for Florida, ladies and gentlemen. It's a 73% chance to victory compared to Alabama's 26, almost 27% chance to win this game. Going to be a hard physical game across the board, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just give you some of their last matchups to give you a comparison. This is how this Alabama squad is stacking up. They did play a common opponent, ladies and gentlemen, in Oklahoma. Alabama beat Oklahoma by 2, 83-81. Very, very close margin. However, when Florida played Oklahoma, it was a night and day comparison across that front. You have that score 96-79 in Florida's dominant performance. So I don't think that Alabama's going to hang around. However, they could play it close and create a lot of problems for this Florida squad. But I think Florida's the better team. If you look at more of their stats, it's just more in Florida's favor of what we got it. Florida flavor. Yeah, that's going to be a new one. That we should put that on a t-shirt now. Florida flavor. I don't know how that looks like, but that's going to be a fun slogan to say. Florida flavor. Nice little tongue twister, too. If we look at Florida's games, ladies and gentlemen, the last 5 outside of the Oklahoma, they beat South Carolina 95-48. Whoa. What a butt whooping right there, ladies and gentlemen. What a whooping right there. But then they lose to Auburn 76-67, beat LSU 79-61, beat Vanderbilt 98-94. Alabama, on the other hand, beat Mizzou 90-64, lost to Tennessee 79-73. You already know what I said for Oklahoma. They ended up beating Mississippi State 97-82, and they lost to Texas 92-88. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, very, I would say, close in the margins in that scenario. Across the board in this facet of this game. Now, if you're looking at the whole stat line, what we got cooking here today, the swamp looks won't be drained today. However, Alabama likes to put up points. Points per game, 92 points per game. Florida, on the other hand, about, 80, 86 points per game. Not too shabby. The defense shows. Defense, like they say, wins championship games. Alabama points against, almost 82 points that they give up. They don't play defense that well. And it kind of shows in it, like I said, in the last 5 games. The margins of victory that they have, like they like to put up a lot of points. But then they lose games that look so bad. Like Texas is a prime example. Even though it's not a good measurement, but it's like all the teams that they're playing up against are getting like 90 points or 80 points per game. It shows that defense that Alabama doesn't have, unless they're playing teams that have good field percentage, which a lot of cases that they are. But Alabama's not shooting well from the field with a 45% from the field. Now, if you look at Florida, their defense is not great either. It's 71 points that they end up giving up. However, they're shooting decent from the field, 47, which a lot of teams are doing, which is not too bad. Rebounds. Rebounds matter in basketball, as we all know. Alabama's rebounds, about 42 rebounds on average per game. But if you look at Florida, ladies and gentlemen, 46 rebounds per game. The game of rebound game will be played at large here today. At large of what we got going on. I don't think you can overturn it. Those rebounds are gonna what helps create those runs late in this basketball game, which is going to either separate Florida from the pack or which is going to keep Alabama lingering around for too long if Florida doesn't get rebounds under control. But this rebound should be fantastic, should be fine across the board, ladies and gentlemen, in this scenario. Now, as we keep marching down this list, assists per game, ladies and gentlemen, we got 16 for both squads. They can move the ball around, they can create assists and create open shots. Block party for the blocks, I mean, Alabama's almost averaging 6 blocks per game compared to Florida's 5. So block party goes to Alabama in this one. And then you have steals, both scrappy. Alabama averages 7 steals a game compared to Florida's 6 steals a game. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of those things. What's going to set this apart is Alabama's defense and Florida's offense. That's what we're going to, not offense, but rebounds. Those are what's going to end up dictating how this game unfolds. If Alabama can get to a quick start and their defense can keep things under control and capitalize on mistakes when they need to capitalize, they should be okay in this one. But I think Florida's just going to come out and dominate this game, and I don't think it's going to be something what we think. I think it's going to be close, and it's going to be a tale of two halves, I want to say, where maybe Florida jumps out early, makes a good dominant push, and Alabama tries to claw early in the second half, but the game just turns into a runaway, and it turns to be Florida's favor across that scenario. Now, let's take a look at the next men's game that looks relatively good across the state that we got going on here today. Now, continuing on this great campaign that we got going on, number 9, Illinois versus number 5, Nebraska. Men's college basketball, Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time on FS1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a great game. Nebraska's only loss was to Michigan, and a close one by 3. Outside of that, they have been having a fantastic, dominant year across the board in this one. And I don't think we can overlook this. We got common opponents where we can compare apples to apples in this scenario, which we love to do. But it's going to be a physical contest between these two squads. Like, Illinois record is 18-3 with a 9-1 Big Ten record. And Nebraska's 20-1 with a 9-1 Big Ten record. Again, very good. I think this margin should be a little bit closer than what we think it is, even though Illinois' record is well, not record, but chance to win this game is 45.9% chance to win this game compared to Nebraska's 54.1% chance to win this game. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tight one in this scenario. And I think we're going to get a game that is going to be on the edge of your seats from start to finish, a hard physical basketball game where the stats matter on how you shoot from the field, rebounds, turnovers, and runs will dictate how this game plays out. Illinois played solid against Purdue and a great fashion along that line. I like on how this matchup is shaking out across the board and how things will just drive this game across the board. So let's compare apples to apples. When they played Washington, Illinois 75-66. When Nebraska played, 76-66. Looking pretty good. Minnesota, relatively similar, but however, Nebraska's defense shut down Minnesota. Here we go. In the Minnesota game for Nebraska, 76-57. However, when Illinois played, it was 77-67 in that margin. So as you can see, vastly different when they played Minnesota. Maybe Minnesota had a bad night. However, it's like a tale of two halves. But then even if you look at the Northwestern games that these two teams played for each other, for Nebraska, it was 77-58. When Illinois played, it was 79-68. So, defense is very strong for Nebraska. However, Illinois likes to put up points. So, we're going against a defense that's solid and an offense that likes to go on runs. That's what I'm guessing what's end up happening for this Illinois squad across the board. Now, if we look at the stat line, the defense of Nebraska kind of shows. For example, if we look at the steals per game, ladies and gentlemen, Nebraska is averaging about 7 steals per game compared to Illinois steal stats of about 4. That's huge. If you want to say half of those steals are converted into points, that's possibly on the crazy end. Let's play nice. You could get 9 points if you get 9 steals and shoot all threes. That's a swing. That's like almost a 10-point swing if you want to look at that. If you want to use that. Max in, if they capitalize all their points on steals, that is 14 free points that goes back into Nebraska's bank to win this game. Now, if you look at blocks, if you play that fundamental basketball, play how you want to play and play the court half court style, the block party is there. However, it's not great for both of these squads. Nebraska's not blocking. They're averaging almost about 3 blocks per game compared to Illinois' block party of about 5. 5 blocks for this scenario, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at the assist, Nebraska has more assists with 18 compared to Illinois. His game of 14.5 in that scenario. Rebounds, ladies and gentlemen. No, Illinois has a better rebound percentage of 42 rebounds per game compared to Nebraska's 35. But maybe they're just getting out physical and boxed out well down low. From the field, even about 47-48 for both of these two schools. Points against 68 compared to 65. Illinois 68 compared to Nebraska's 65. And then points per game on average, what they're averaging out, ladies and gentlemen, is on the stat line of 85 to 80, almost 81, we'll just say for Nebraska. So overall, great performance. What a great ball game we'll end up having today, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think we can overshadow how good this magnitude of this game is for that scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Those are some key men's games that we should keep a close eye on too of what we got going on this weekend. Now let's take a look at the women's side of things. Now, UConn's women is dominant as we've seen for the last 2 decades, I want to say. Last 2 decades, if not more. It's a true dynasty, I would say, for what we got for UConn. But we got another blue blood in women's college basketball, Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, Tennessee is just doing okay this year. It's nothing too flashy. They're dominating the SEC with what they got cooking, and that's fine. UConn's women, dominant as always. Love to see it. Most likely, I will probably say UConn and South Carolina in the finals. Wouldn't be surprising. But you never know. March Madness, anything can happen. But we could see this probably as being an Elite 8 matchup, depending how Tennessee finishes out the year and how their seeding ends up going. But there's a chance that they could win the SEC, if not be seeded very well as another 3 seed in conference play. Well, not in conference play, in the tournament play. UConn's record now, ladies and gentlemen, is 22-0 with a 10-0 record staying at home. Very impressive by the Lady Huskies in this scenario. Tennessee, however, 14-4 with a 6-1 road record, ladies and gentlemen. Very impressive as well in this scenario. However, the margin of victory, chance to win, is not looking great for Tennessee. It's about 4.5 compared to UConn's 95.5 of what we're looking at here today, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't know what to tell you. What we got cooking here in this scenario of that. So, without further ado, you can catch this game noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time on Fox, ladies and gentlemen. This game Should be good on paper, but that's not how it's going to play out. UConn has just been dominating teams. Let's look at their last 5 games. They beat Xavier 97-39. They beat Seton Hall 92-52. They beat Georgetown 83-42. They beat Notre Dame. Normally has a good squad every now and then. 85-47. And they beat Villanova 99-50. This UConn squad is a monster. Just based off those games alone. They are just destroying the court and taking care of business and taking names. They are looking to win a national title. And it looked very, very convincing. Tennessee, they lose to Mississippi State 77-62. They beat Kentucky close 60-58. They beat Alabama convincingly 77-59. They beat Arkansas 85-50. And they beat Mississippi State already, which they lost to literally on the 29th. But they beat them 90-80. So they probably had a cold night, the Lady Volunteers, on the 29th against Mississippi State, which is very possible. But the stat line is not looking too shabby. I mean, defensive-wise, it's going to be a defensive contest, but UConn has just been dominant from the field, points per game, you name it. It's just been a show of remarkable talent, and just based off that alone. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's break down the stats. Tennessee, average points per game about 70, 78, compared to UConn's 90. What a monster what we got there. You got Tennessee for points allowed, 61 points allowed, compared to UConn's women's of 50.5. Woo. Dominant D from the Lady Huskies. From the field, Tennessee is struggling. 41% from the field, ladies and gentlemen, compared to UConn's 53% from the field. Very dominant performance from this UConn squad. Like I said, I cannot stress it enough. But when you shoot that well from the field, you don't need a rebound that lot. You got 37 rebounds per game for this ladies Husky squad compared to Tennessee's 42. So give the rebound squad to Tennessee, but maybe that's because they're rebounding a lot of their missed shots from the field. Who knows? Assist, UConn dominates with 24 assists per game. So they have great ball movement compared to Tennessee's 14. Blocks are about the same, about 4 for both squads. But the steals, my goodness, 16 steals per game for this UConn squad. That's where all their points are coming from the steals. Let's just think about it. If you times that by 2, ladies and gentlemen, that's about 32 points. If they convert those all into fast breaks, and convert those into points, ladies and gentlemen, that is 32 points that they could get. Obviously, you don't get that every time, or even if not more than that, but that's assuming that they make all twos and don't get fouled and make all those shots. Compared to Tennessee's about 12. But 16 steals per game, ladies and gentlemen, is an insane stat line to deal with. That's huge on defense. I don't know how you fathom and wrap your head around it, but that's what we're working with here today, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're working with. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, is just the magnitude of what we got going here on here today. I think UConn just takes care of business. I don't think this is much of a competition, and we'll see UConn's dominance. But if Tennessee can find a sliver of hope and derail this undefeated season, I think they're a team to do it. If not, that's South Carolina's job. But we'll see how this game shakes out tomorrow, noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time on Fox, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep marching up further in the women's side. We got Oklahoma, who's number 10 in the nation, versus Texas, number 4 in the nation, women's college basketball. Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, noon Pacific time on ABC. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lady Oklahoma Sooners have a tough road in this game. With a 12% chance to win, with a record of 17-4, 5-3 in the SEC, it's a tall task for them to do. Can they pull up the upset? Certainly. They have the capability. However, it is in Texas, and it's a rivalry matchup. And rivalry games can be very physical, very challenging to overtake and surpass. However, Texas, if you look at their stats, they are 87.6% chance to win this game. Compare with a chance of with a record of 20-2. Their only 2 losses come from conference play, which makes their conference record 5-2. Very, very good margin. So let's look at the last 5 games, ladies and gentlemen. They played Texas A&M. So we have a data point. They played South Carolina, and they played Auburn. So we have apples to compare. They've also played to LSU as well. So let's break this down. So when Oklahoma played A&M, they beat A&M 85-58. When Texas played, it was a spanking, ladies and gentlemen. It was 80-35. 35, ladies and gentlemen. Let that sink in. 35 points this A&M team only scored against Texas. I'm just going to pause and let that sink in. 35. Now, when you look at their next game that they have common opponents, they played Auburn. Oklahoma, when Oklahoma played, 72-65. Good basketball game. When Texas played, 97-36. 36 points that Auburn only scored. 36 points. Let that sink in again. 36 points. Now we got South Carolina, which makes things a little bit more interesting. Oklahoma wins in overtime, which probably could be a loss if you want to look at it. 94-82. Very convincing performance. However, Texas lost to South Carolina in a heartbreaking fashion of 68-65, losing by 3. So that game might be a tell how physical that South Carolina game is. However, LSU is another tale. Oklahoma lost to LSU 91-72. Texas lost to LSU 70-65. Overall, if you look at the games, Texas is the better school on this paper. And at the last 5 games alone. Last 5 games, give the edge to Texas. I would take Texas. I wouldn't take them on the spread, but I would take them for the money line for sure. Just have them win straight up. And I think that's a nice, easy payout, even though they are a huge favorite in the scenario. So let's break down the points. Both averaging 89 points per game on average. Defensive-wise, as you can see, Oklahoma has a very rocky defense of 63 compared to Texas's 53. From the field, Texas is more of a dominant squad with a 51% chance from the field compared to Oklahoma's 46% chance from the field. Now, if we look at other things, you have rebounds. Oklahoma loves to rebound, 50 rebounds per game compared to Texas's 40 in this scenario. So very, very simple, very, very easy in this scenario. Give the rebounds to Oklahoma. Very, very strong box out. Assists, I mean, it's relatively close. Oklahoma is a little bit more better ball movement of 21 assists per game compared to Texas. This is 18, almost 19. The block party is relatively similar. Oklahoma is very close to 6 blocks per game compared to Texas's blocks per game of about 5. Steals per game about almost 11 compared to Texas's 13. So relatively easy across the board. But I think this Lady Longhorns team is a little bit more physical, has the better caliber in this scenario on top of that. So give me the edge to Texas in this scenario in that front. Now let's move into the other slot, ladies and gentlemen, where we got Michigan. Before we go, you can catch number 10, Oklahoma versus Texas, number 4 in the nation. Women's college basketball, Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time on ABC. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, in the fourth, and well, not in the fourth slot, but almost rounding out the women's games, we got number 9, the Lady Wolverines of Michigan versus the Lady Spartans of Michigan State, number 13 in the nation, women's college basketball. Sunday, February 1st, noon Eastern Time, a high noon showdown in the Big Ten, ladies and gentlemen. 9 a.m. Pacific Time on FS1. A great way to start off your Sunday going into the lunch hour. Very, very beautiful, very, very good across that margin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you take a look with this game, I think it's going to be a close game. I just like how close the teams are in the rankings, with how they've been playing in the Big Ten. Michigan is 9-1 in the Big Ten. Michigan State 8-2 in the Big Ten. Overall record, Michigan is 18-3 compared to Michigan State's 19-2 with their overall record in this scenario. Chance to win, Michigan has a 59% chance to win compared to Michigan State, about 40% chance to win. In that scenario, almost 41. Looking at some of their games, they don't have much common opponents that I can compare to. So let's just give a quick rundown of what we got going on. Michigan State has Purdue. Well, they beat Purdue on the 29th. 86-55. They took care of USC 74-68 in this scenario. They lose to Iowa 75-68. They beat Nebraska by 2, 73-71. They beat Oregon 85-81. Not too shabby. Looking all right if you ask me. However, the Lady Wolverines, they took care of Indiana. Well, they did. They beat Indiana 95-67. They took care of USC 73-67. Similar to how Michigan State beat USC. They beat Rutgers 94-60. Lost to Vanderbilt 72-69. And they beat Illinois 85-69. That's what we got. So let's look at the stats. The stats don't lie of what we got going on. About Michigan, the Lady Wolverines. They got 87 points per game compared to Michigan State's 86 points per game. Points against, 60 for both squads, evenly matched. From the field, Michigan State edges it out a little bit better, 49% from the field compared to Michigan's 47. Rebounds go to Michigan with about 42, and Michigan State has about 37 points per game. However, Michigan has 79.6 points, well, for the assist, and Michigan State about 18, almost 19 assists per game. The block parties, not much blocking going on for these two squads. Michigan about almost 4, and Michigan State's almost about 4.5. Steals relatively similar with 12 steals per game, ladies and gentlemen, for both squads. I like this game. It's going to be a very physical, a very hard-nosed basketball game. Based on how these teams like to play, I like how this intensity is. We love a good rivalry matchup. The men's game was quite interesting. Michigan was very strong in the men's game. Let Michigan State come back, and they were able to put them away because Michigan went on a late run in that game. However, are we going to see something similar where Michigan comes out very strong and the Lady Spartans have to make a siege late in this game to turn it around? We don't know, but this is a game that has a very high anticipation. And can the Lady Spartans redeem their loss for their men that couldn't get the job done last night? I think they can get it done on Sunday. So you got to tune in noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time on FS1, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give it up to round off the games for this week of women's college basketball in this scenario. I think we got a very physical, competitive matchup, which we could also probably see within a Final Four appearance with this matchup here. We have Iowa, who's number 8 in the nation, versus UCLA, number 2 in the nation. Women's college basketball, Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time on Fox, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a good one. We like the margins, what we got here. UCLA is a dominant ball club, 10-0 in the Big Ten, haven't lost yet, looking to keep that streak alive. They're only they're 20-1 for their overall record. Very dominant performance. We could see UCLA and UConn in the finals, if not Final Four appearance. Maybe depending, most likely I would say Final Four appearance based on how things are shaking out within the Big Ten, ladies and gentlemen. Iowa is nothing to snooze out either. In the Big Ten, they're 9-1. Very strong ball club across the board. Overall record, ladies and gentlemen, 18-3 for this ball club for Iowa, the Lady Hawkeyes, what we got going on. The chance to win, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, it's not too pretty for Iowa with about 10, almost 11% chance to win. However, UCLA, ladies and gentlemen, is an 89% chance to win. 89% chance to win. That's huge, if you ask me, in that margin. So let's take a look at their last 5 games. They don't have common opponents that I could use as a frame of reference, so let's just run through them. You got UCLA, who took care of Illinois 80-67, beat Northwestern 80-46, beat Purdue 96-48, beat Maryland 97-67, and took care of Minnesota 76-58. Iowa, on the other hand, lost to USC 81-69, beat Ohio State 91-70, played Maryland in overtime 85-78, beat Michigan State 75-68, and beat Oregon 74-66. Yes, they have a common opponent in Maryland, but Iowa had to go to overtime against Maryland. So where UCLA dominated Maryland. So that's why I like UCLA in this matchup to win convincingly in a dominant fashion on how they handled Maryland in this one. But it's basketball. You could have game of runs. You could have something happen from the field, and it will be a true indicating performance of what we got going on here. So let's break the stat line down, ladies and gentlemen. The stats matter to some extent, but depends on how the team comes out in performance today, ladies and gentlemen. It's a close one. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be something fantastic to watch, ladies and gentlemen. I like how this is going to unfold, but give me UCLA to win it. So let's do a quick stats rundown for you all today. You got Iowa with 80 points per game compared to UCLA's almost 87 points per game. Points against, almost 64 compared to 57. So give that to UCLA. From the field, Iowa's not too bad with 49%, but UCLA's percentage from the field, 52% from the field. Rebounds, relatively similar in the same stat line, ladies and gentlemen, 42 compared to 43. Assists per game, ladies and gentlemen, very similar, 21 to 22. Block party, ladies and gentlemen, Iowa kind of averages about 3 blocks per game compared to UCLA's 4.5. Steals, relatively similar, 8 steals per game compared to almost 9 steals per game, ladies and gentlemen. So overall, it sounds good. That's like the other stats seem very, very close in this margin, which is very good if you ask me. Very, very good to see how physical this is. But does this turn into a runaway for UCLA? Can Iowa's defense lock in and be physical enough to keep UCLA at bay in this scenario? Keep them tamed in this matchup? That we don't know. That is a very close and tough stat line to look at, to foresee, to manage in this scenario. But it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be very interesting. Going to keep people on their toes, and the other stat lines across on how this is going to end up unfolding out in this scenario. So you can catch number 8 Iowa versus number 2 UCLA women's college basketball tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time on Fox, ladies and gentlemen, on Fox. Now, since those games kind of rounded out for this week of college basketball, there's some news that I'm personally excited about, that, as you can see in the header, we'll kind of take a look for it. The women's college basketball Final Four will be in Columbus, Ohio, 2027. So next year it will be in Columbus, Ohio. So book your tickets to visit Columbus, Ohio. They revealed the banner, I would say, this week. So very excited for that. Me personally, I think I should try my best to get tickets. The earlier I buy them, I feel like the better. At the same time, I just don't know who's coming, so I don't know how much tickets I need to buy and get people in to see it. I wish I had a house so then I could house a couple people, so no one would have to pay the crazy hotel fees and all that stuff. All they would have to take care of is, traveling to get to Columbus, Ohio. That would be fantastic, but I don't think I'll have the luxury of going into 2027 with a house, sadly, based on how the economy's out and all that stuff. But there's a dream where Columbus will get the opportunity to return to get a women's Final Four again, and the finals. I mean, the last time Columbus had it was in 2018, so definitely, the step in the right direction for the city. The city is growing at an alarming rate, which is great to see. Having them bring more sporting events into Columbus is great. We got the USFL coming to Columbus, so the Columbus Aviators are going to kick off this season this spring. So the city's growing. We got another sports team. The last sports team to join the city was our women's professional volleyball team in their, I think, third season that they're entering in now. Those games are fun. The court is cool to be at. It's a great afternoon/evening to participate in. I need to get back to that game. It's a great atmosphere to be a part of. I'm just trying to look for good deals to get some good, cool swag that's free and have a great time to being at that arena at Nationwide. So looking for Columbus to keep taking steps in the right direction as the city continues to grow rapidly in 2027. They're already working on building up their transit. Amtrak is looking to try to invest in a rail service to connect Cleveland and Cincinnati again to try to do that. So I like where Columbus is going in growth and rampant production. Their airport is expanding. It should be finished by the end of the decade, by 2029, 2030. So overall, Columbus is a hub that is popping, that is growing, but also from a lot of the stats, the city is declining a little bit in population, but granted, people are moving, trying to find jobs in a tough economy. But some people do return back to Columbus to raise a family, which is good to see in that aspect for that, perspective. But as the city continues to grow and as they lock in the mass transit, I think it's going to skyrocket how the city progressively grows. The train station where it would be is by the convention center downtown, which is relatively close to the Nationwide facility. I wish they had the transit now, because then I guarantee you people from Cleveland and Cincinnati would come down to watch the women's Finals Four if Amtrak linked it up. But sadly, the state's lagging behind on that front. And I think it's definitely needed for this city based on how fast it's growing. I would say another train stop would need to be the airport, but that kind of impacts the airport's revenue because parking at the airport is a key generator of revenue for, I would say, the Columbus airport, for any airport in general. But having that mass transit to get you to and from the airport will help to reduce some of the Uber costs to and from the airport. Just be able to Uber to downtown. A lot of times the hotels are downtown too, so people traveling in makes the most sense. So overall, I would say this is taking Columbus in the steps to the right direction for future sporting events that could come to this city. I mean, Columbus could possibly even host a WrestleMania. That would be cool. Philadelphia's have it, but Columbus needs more major events to come to the city. That's what's going to help drive larger events to come to it. I know they've had the MLS All-Star Weekend in the past before. So Columbus is a city that's growing, that needs more spotlight. And I know there's other cities out in the U.S. that have the same case, like the Milwaukees of the world, Sacramento, outside of, your traditional big cities like Atlanta, Seattle, New York, Philadelphia, Orlando, Phoenix, just those cities alone will always get it. But when the small cities like, Columbus getting it, I know Indianapolis can get it too, but Milwaukee getting it, Nashville getting it, Memphis getting it, just those cities alone, it changes how the country sees those cities, and it gets them through. Like, being a part of March Madness, being in the early rounds, it's exciting. It's thrilling. I've been for the one in Columbus. I like it. To me, it's right in my own backyard. I don't have to drive. I mean, I could go out to Cleveland. Again, easy drive, 2-hour drive, a good little afternoon extravaganza. But also, Indianapolis is like a 3-hour drive. Same with Pittsburgh, 3-hour drive. I can see it. Same with Detroit. I can see that too. But the Midwest, I would say, is key for all those sporting trips if you place yourself in the right section of the city. I think Columbus is a fantastic to travel to, see all the different college sporting events. I know I'm trying to advertise Columbus, which I appreciate that the city has given me a lot of opportunities from being from Ohio State and along that front. But it's one of those things, the Midwest grants you so much opportunities for different sporting events because of Chicago, because of Cleveland, because of Indianapolis, because of Minnesota and Minneapolis. Like, there are cities within the Midwest that get sporting traffic and big events that come through. But the thing that you have to get through in the Midwest, ladies and gentlemen, is the cold. Right now, when I got up this morning, it was about -7 degrees because of the Arctic blast that we got thrown at us right now. After that, once you can get past the coldness of the Midwest, when it can be brutal, the falls are beautiful. The summers can get hot, but you got the Great Lakes to enjoy. They're like I said, the Midwest is a true sports gym outside of the Northeast. Like the Northeast, you got the hustle and bustle, you got the mass transit, you can get to Philly, New York, Boston, and DC, and those are your key sporting cities. You'll always get major concerts rolling through. But in the Midwest, you can get those concerts, but you got to drive, my friend. You are driving a couple hours, if not a few hours, depending where you go. But you can still see those concerts at a reduced rate compared to those major cities. However, those major cities, you're paying a cheap train ride versus you doing a gas trip, and you'd be like, oh, I'm tired from the concert. Now I got this 2-hour drive back. If not, you're staying in that city. But for, I would say, the Northeast, you just hop on the Amtrak on the last train out as best you can, or go take a train outside the city to get a cheaper hotel. In the Midwest, you can't do that too well based on how the routing ends up going. But again, this is what I'm preaching about. Seeing stuff like this happen in your own backyard is very exciting to me as a fan. I know with San Diego getting their MLS team, I could see an all-star weekend in San Diego, which would be cool to attend to. I need to get back out to San Diego. The last time I was out there, I was a young lad, and I went to SeaWorld. And I didn't really explore San Diego too much, but I need to make a return to San Diego to just say I was down there to enjoy the Museum of the USS Midway, enjoy a MLS game down there, as well as the San Diego Wave for their women's squad. Like San Diego is like, it's not like a Columbus, but it's a sports city that is good to be around. You got the Padres down there for great MLB. Like I said, you got things that you need to enjoy San Diego. Go down there, enjoy the water. Even though I've been in the Pacific Ocean and it's some cold water, and how like the ocean current flows, it flows down from Alaska down. So that's why it's a little bit colder versus on the Atlantic. It kind of flows up from the Bahamas, which is why the ocean water is a little bit warmer compared to the Pacific from my own personal experience about both of those oceans. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Hardwood Game Day with your host, Trevor Williams. We're going to get you on out of here so you can enjoy and get prepped for the afternoon slate of games for today and for tomorrow's slate of activity. So we'll catch you next time on another edition of Hardwood Game Day. So long for now. Bye-bye.